Hi friends, and welcome back. And today we're going to talk about what most vets do not know about selling their practice to veterinary practice owners. This is really a veterinary practice owner video, and I think if you are one, this is going to be extremely valuable for you. So who am I? I'm Dr. Michael, the founder of Transitions Elite. We've sold over $250 million worth of practices, and so this is really the information that I think is important for you as you begin to think about your selling journey. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the first major point is to understand your practice's value. And this is where many practice owners get it wrong. They either overestimate or underestimate their value and they leave millions on the table. And let's just take a look at a couple examples. So first one is Dr. Darcy. She had a 2-doctor practice, went to sell it by herself, and she got a single offer that was 1.2 million. Now this was quite disappointing for her as she heard of all these high valuations, and she realized she made an error of trying to sell the practice alone. And her main error was that she forgot to do, or she didn't know how to do an adjusted EBITDA or create competitive pressures. And I'll show you exactly how we do that and how you can do the same thing yourself. So she called Transitions Elite, and we took her to market and ended up generating 3 million. So a $1.8 million difference. Next is Dr. Sarah. And Dr. Sarah had a beautiful practice in the Midwest, and she increased her valuation through using Transitions Elite from 15 million to 22.5. And this isn't just about Transitions Elite, but this is the importance of having a real M&A advisor that's able to represent you through the process. And then the next example is Dr. Alex, and he had 3 practices in a region that had a lot of competitive buying pressure historically, but they were all out of funds and they were recapitalizing. And none of the traditional buyers that he was expecting to sell to had any interest, and he didn't get any offers. Kind of shocking because he had a very valuable setup. So what we were able to do is we were able to take one of the big buyers that we know, convince them that Dr. Alex's practices would be a great platform investment where they could get into a new area, and they came in with a $40 million offer. So really quite impressive, and he was thrilled. So the key is to understand the strategic value. So who are the buyers that would be very hungry for a practice like yours in your specific area, create a competitive bidding process, and then understand the market timing, because this could dramatically impact your practice's valuation. Now, what are the signs that it's time to consider selling? Firstly, if you're struggling on the HR side, struggling on recruiting team members, recruiting DVMs, and are really tired of all the admin, and there's so much more to life than the admin. And I always think about a veterinary practice owner is in a very difficult business. It's like you own a pizza shop, but you have to make most of the pizzas, and it's extremely exhausting. Next is feeling overwhelmed by the business responsibilities. Third is a desire for better work-life balance. We've all sacrificed so much when we own our practices, and there's no need for that, right? I mean, there's now an option where you can be a great veterinarian, focus on your passion, while also having the work-life balance to spend time with your family, get back to those hobbies, and in fact be paid millions in the process. And then finally, just the stress of it all that's really impacting the quality of life. And I think practice owners are even more susceptible to the risk of suicide than a typical veterinarian, because they have so much responsibility on their shoulders, and they're ultimately the ones that are accountable. And you might be feeling the exact same thing. So next are the hidden benefits of selling, and this is really interesting. So once you sell, you're able to focus purely on veterinary care. So you're able to be a veterinarian. You don't have to lose your identity. Next is you have no admin burdens. The staff, in fact, get enhanced benefits, and they also get professional development. So they're able to move up in the buyer's organization in a way that we as independent practice owners simply cannot do. Next, you get to preserve your medical autonomy. So if you sell to the right buyer, you are the one who's responsible for the medical side and nobody else. And that really, I think, is a big alleviation of a pain point or a barrier that many practice owners have, because they don't want to lose their identity and they want to control medicine. Of course, reducing your personal liability, so you get to secure your future, you get your work-life balance back, and you also will get access via your practice to the components of scale that these buyers have. So they negotiate a lot lower contracts in terms of labs and supplies than you're able to do, because they have multiple practices, and that reduction in scale is able to make your practice a lot more successful from a business perspective. What are the most common misconceptions that I see practice owners suffering from? The first is thinking that the first offer is the best offer. There's that old maxim, and it's absolutely not true. If you take Dr. Sarah's example, she was offered 15 million at first and she ended up closing at 22 and a half. Or Dr. Darcy, who was offered 1.2 million and she ended up with 3 million at the close. So never accept the first offer and never negotiate with a single buyer. Next is thinking that selling is all about retirement. All three of those examples, the owners were in their mid 40s and they just realized that selling was smart right now because of the market. And it wasn't the end of their veterinary career. It was just closing one chapter, but now they have millions in their account that they can then decide what to do next. In a few years, that could be opening another practice. That could be creating a completely new and different design in terms of how to do veterinary medicine, or it could be just focusing on veterinary medicine and now pursuing other hobbies. The third misconception is thinking that you really lose control. And a sister company to Transitions.ly is called Devium.ly, and it helps practices to grow. And recently we had our summit, and in the audience were multiple practices that had sold, and the owners were there. And I kind of went up to them. I said, "Hey guys, you do know that you sold your practice. Why are you here?" Because everybody else is hungry to grow their practice. And they said, "Well, my practice is still my baby, whether I own it or not, and I'm here to make sure that it is successful." And so you lose the burden, but you still have the control to be able to drive it and make it a success. So it's like you get your cake and eat it too. You can still have a lot of fun with your practice without having the ultimate liability. The fourth one is really thinking that you should, or you'll save money by selling alone, and it's a nightmare to sell a business on its own, whether it's a vet practice or anything else, and it leaves so much on the table. I remember when I was studying mergers and acquisitions, I'm a veterinarian, of course, M&A, my professor put a slide on the board, and he said, "This is all I tell my clients, that on average, taking average data, business owners that sell their business by themselves get 5 times profit, and business owners that sell their business with representation get 7 times profit." And as soon as I saw that slide, I thought to myself, I will never sell one of my businesses alone. I will always get representation because it's almost 50% more just by getting the representation. And then finally is underestimating the strategic value that your practice could have to a specific buyer who's hungry for a practice in your area, because they aren't hungry for one in Alaska. They might be expanding in Ohio and you're in Ohio, and so you become this gem in their crown that they really want to acquire, and that can drive significant value. So what are the critical success factors? One of the biggest is market timing. And this is why if you're in your mid-40s, a younger vet, that you should really be thinking about this seriously, because you could keep your practice for the next 10 years and be paid $0, because even if you're successful at growing your practice, the valuations could be cut by half in 10 years and you've effectively made zero. Next is making sure that you have an M&A, not a traditional business broker, but an M&A level advisor that's able to create this bidding environment to drive the value and the negotiation of your practice. Third is, of course, understanding the strategic value. We talked about that. Having clear financial records. There's nothing worse. There's nothing that will kill a deal faster than you have your financial records, you sort of turn them over to a potential buyer. They start going through it and they realize things don't match. They will run away. And I've had that experience, and it's brutal. So make sure you don't make sure you get everything organized. The next is creating this competitive bidding pressure. That's the key to driving the value for your practice. And then finding buyers that are hungry for your specific area. So how can you preserve the legacy of your practice? So the 3 things that are most important for an owner, from my experience, is maintaining the name and the culture. So this is really number 1. And this will exclude a set of buyers that I'll talk about in a second. Number 2 is to make sure that the medicine continues the same so that your clients that have been so loyal to you don't have any negative experience or suffer in any way. And then finally, that the staff that you've been able to build are able to stay together and carry on your legacy. And so when we work with practice owners, these are the three things that we ask and then mandate from the buyers when they enter into the negotiation phase. And again, whether it's transitions lead to somebody else, why should you absolutely make sure that you have a M&A level representation going into this selling process? So firstly, it is through generating the demand of multiple bidders that your practice value will go from 3 million to 5 million, and never negotiate one-on-one. So these buyers spend a tremendous amount of resources reaching out, whining and dining practice owners just like you, because they want to get you one-on-one. They know they will save millions if they can convince you to sell a letter of intent, tie up your practice, and then drive the price into the ground as they go through due diligence by pointing out all these errors that you have in the due diligence. And it is the most tragic component of this entire story. And so if you remember one thing, do not sell your practice on your own. The second one is similar about driving competition. Third is that this representative, this advisor, will quarterback the due diligence process. So for us, we have a 120-day window. So we drive like demons through that 120 days, because any delay is going to cause valuation in your practice to drop off. You lose a vet, the economy goes south, the revenue decreases, anything. You have a big complaint, the buyer is going to say, you know what, we offered 10 million, but now we can only do 7. And you're so exhausted that you just kind of roll over and take it. And then the rest of your life, you live with that sort of regret that you could have had this record-breaking sale, but you lost it in the end because of the due diligence. And so a really good advisor or a broker, but really from an M&A background, will kind of kick everyone's butt, from the buyer to your own legal and accounting team, to get things done. The other critical error that this broker will be able to help you with, again, if they have an M&A background, is to find the right attorney. Because if you use your local attorney, they're not deal makers, and they're in fact going to jeopardize this process as you go through it by creating lots of barriers, by redlining the documents back and forth, negotiating small points, and those small points could in fact kill your entire deal. And finally, and this is a fascinating and one of the most least understood aspects of having a really good advisor, is that they are able to drive the buyer accountability. So for example, we had a practice and they were offered 12 million, and 3 days before the practice was about to actually be sold, the buyer comes back and says, you know what, we can't do the deal. You just lost a veterinarian. The valuation is going to decrease significantly. And what we said is three things. Number one, this is why the practice is worth 12 million. Number two, I can tell you that this seller, the practice owner, won't accept a penny less. And number three, that if you do this with this particular practice, we have 5 other practices that you're in the process of negotiating with, and we will tell them this is how you play. That at the end you drop the price, and that you're untrustworthy, and you should really reconsider actually engaging with this particular buyer. So you'd better call your board, call us back, and do the 12 million. 2 hours later, he calls back and says, yep, okay, we'll do the 12 million. Now, they would have likely dropped the price from 12 to 9 million. And I talked to the owners later, and they said they would have accepted it because they were so tired at that point. So always make sure that you are using this representative, your key advisor, who's doing deals with these same buyers, because they drive this level of accountability. So how can you actually be preparing for the sale? So number one is to organize your financial records. So this is the preparation stage. And a great broker is going to take you through the process through the eyes of the buyer. So they're going to basically double and triple check everything, make sure everything matches. And they're also going to perform something that's extremely important, which is the adjusted EBITDA. And you can ignore topic branch too. Adjusted EBITDA is where we take your P&L and we add back all of these expenses that the buyer will not incur. So this could be personal expenses, this could be one-time legal expenses, accounting, and this can substantially increase your profitability. It can take you from $350,000 to $450,000 just by doing this process. And if you have a 10x multiple, that's an extra $1 million of sale price just by doing the professionally adjusted EBITDA. So something that's very critical. Next is to assess the market conditions. So many times a practice will come to us and we will say, you know what, now is not the time in your area to sell. And you have these two critical problems that you need to fix. Once you fix them, then we will take you to market, because then you'll get a record-breaking sale. And so understanding exactly the dynamic in your area applied to your practice is critical. Number three, any growth opportunities. Again, should you sell now or should you wait? Ensuring that all of your procedures are documented. Do you have staff contracts? Do you have DVM contracts? And if you don't, navigating you across that hurdle to make sure that you have them, because the buyer will absolutely require them. Making sure that your team is not toxic. If you have any toxic members of the team, then we have to deal with that first, because a buyer will sniff that out very quickly. And it could be 90 days through the due diligence, and they say, you know what, we don't want to get involved in this practice. And then finally, understanding what your metrics are and bringing those metrics to the buyer. And common ones are your average transaction value, your client base, the demographics of your clients in the area, what your growth trends have been, and what the future is going to look like, and painting this picture of excitement for the buyer and multiple buyers to get in these the competitive bidding pressure. Moving on to what happens after the sale. So after the sale is as critical as before the sale. And this gets negotiated at the letter of intent stage. So this is really where the clarity comes of what is your role going to be after the practice, and where is their role, and where is the line. Well, many junior brokers will simply rush through the letter of intent, when in fact it is the most critical time to be able to negotiate these things. Otherwise, it's going to break down in the actual sale process. So the first one is going to be, how do you want to continue? What's your duration of employment? Typically, it's between 2 to 3 years, but that is getting longer, and that's a good reason to sell now, because in the future it could be 4 or 5 years that you're obligated to the practice. What's your responsibilities in terms of recruiting? Typically, it's nothing. What's your responsibilities in terms of admin? Typically, nothing. And then what is your schedule like? So you can negotiate whatever you want. You could get 5 weeks a year if that's important to you. And you can negotiate what the hours are. Typically, it's a 4-day work week. So just think that you can focus on, for example, your favorite aspect of veterinary medicine without having to get tied up with all the other stuff. And this comes down to the work-life balance. And also, you can pursue CE in a way that you never were able to do before, because you have the time and the energy to really go back to the basics and understand what you want to focus on the medical side. So what are the key decisions in terms of the market timing? So first of all, right now there is, of course, strong interest from private equity groups. And as I mentioned before, the legacy is a critical decision for you. And typically practice owners do not like to sell to the corporate groups. They don't want to change their logo. They don't want to change their name. So private equity are financial buyers, and all they want is to have your cash flow on their books so that they can pool together greater aspects of cash and also tap into greater pools of capital. And so they also offer the highest valuations. So again, you get your cake and eat it too. And they don't want to change anything. They want you in the practice. They want you in the practice for the period of time, absolutely. But they want all your protocols and all your systems to continue as is, because that is what they are buying. Next is going to be, can we create multiple qualified buyers? And this is a very important part of timing. Sometimes we will not take a practice to market because we know two of the big ones are combining together. And if we take a practice to market and they're in the process, they're not going to bid. But if we can wait, then they're going to be a very powerful bidding force that will drive the valuation. The third one is the platform investment, like Dr. Alex. Can we bring in an outside buyer who's not in the area, convincing them that your practice is going to be ideal to get started in that geographic region? And the two aspects here are very important. So why have valuations gone up from 3 to 5x to 7 to 15x that we're seeing right now? We just signed an offer for 14.8x in terms of multiple. I mean, totally incredible. And the private equity groups bring in their big dollars into a market. They consolidate that market, and then they leave. And once they leave, that buying pressure really drops, and it goes back to those historical norms. This is why now is a critical time, if your practice is able to sell, and then figure out what you do with your life. And what are examples of other reasons that this party could end. So Elizabeth Warren has just brought a proposal really attacking and going after the private equity groups. And if that happens, they're going to have to back down and really be cautious on acquisitions. Again, decreasing competitive bidding pressure. And finally, once their funds dry up, they move on and they go to the next industry. For example, they're consolidating lawn care, HVAC. They're actually also consolidating car washes because it's a cash-based business and has a lot of recurring revenue through memberships. So veterinary market is hot right now from financial buyers, but that will not last long. So really think this through. If you would be happy owning your practice for the next 10 years and be paid $0, then keep your practice. But if that irks you in any way, then now is the time to think about what to do and whether it's, strike while the iron is hot. So what kind of actions, should you be thinking about taking? So the critical first one is to understand, what is your practice's value? Is it sellable? To what extent? Are there any weaknesses that are involved in your practice? And to that end, what you'll find in the description below. And firstly, before jumping into this, if you've enjoyed the video, please click like or subscribe. I'm going to be making a lot more for practice owners like you, and it's a new channel, and I'd really appreciate it. It'll give me the energy. I always look at my stats to see how this is going, and it would just be a big encouragement for me. So thanks so much if you can do that. And kind of in exchange, or as a thank you, really I want to give you the next steps of how you can think about this. You've now got the knowledge from this mind map, but what can you do? So the critical thing is to get a practice value estimate. You don't need a bloated 50-page document, just a conversation with one of our experts that will be able to sit down and say, okay, this is what your practice is probably worth. This is based on the number of vets that you have and the location and everything that you've shared. You should either sell now, or you should fix these 3 to 5 critical profit drivers. And so even if you're thinking about selling in the next 5 years, it's very important to understand what are the profit drivers that you should be able to focus on to drive that valuation, so that in 5 years you are going to be much more valuable than you are today. Or this conversation might say, you know what, there are 3 buyers that are in such a competitive bidding process in your area. I would absolutely consider selling now. And if we do it now, here's what we think the valuation could be. And by the way, this is not just about valuation. It's also about deal terms. If there are limited buyers for your practice, then they will force you to stay in your practice for 4, even upwards of 5 years, and they'll only provide you with 30% of cash and keep all the rest as a holdback, depending upon the performance of your practice. So basically, this entire financial legacy that you could leave for yourself and for your family is in jeopardy, and we don't know what the future is going to bring, especially with a lot of the disruptions that are coming on the technology side and all of the buyers that are consolidating and using their level of scale to negotiate contracts in a very different way, which could impact pricing. So what we've made available is several free practice value estimates. Just click the link in the description or in the pinned comment, and you'll be able to jump on the call with one of our senior brokers and really discuss your practice and get the insights that you need. So I hope that makes sense. Hope that helps. And go ahead and click the link, and we'll jump on a call, and let's see if there's something we can either work with together or give you a plan so that you can make your practice as valuable as possible.